The quantum encryption was unlike anything Dr. Elena Reyes had ever seen. It wasn't just a message. It was a living document, quantum entangled and self-destructing. Its very existence a paradox of information and entropy. She studied the holographic fragments dancing above her desk, each projection a fleeting whisper of data that would dissolve within moments. The Sigma Quadrant Intelligence Report was a nightmare of complexity, a mosaic of conflict that had defied resolution for centuries. Outside the window of orbital station Prometheus, the Earth hung like a blue-green jewel, blissfully unaware of the powder cake brewing light years away. Elena knew that blissful ignorance was about to change. "Commander Liu," she called, her voice cutting through the station's ambient hum. "We need to talk." Jack Liu materialized seconds later, his augmented neural interface still sparkling with residual data streams. Unlike most military strategists, Liu was a hybrid, part quantum physicist, part cineculturalist, entirely unconventional. His dark eyes scanned the holographic display, pupils dilating as he processed the information faster than most humans could blink. "The Lithosian-Volare conflict," he stated. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded. The two species were as different as life could possibly be. The Lithosians were silicon-based crystalline entities, their entire physiology a living mineral matrix that grew, adapted, and communicated through microscopic vibrations. The Volare, in stark contrast, were pure energy beings, plasma contained within complex electromagnetic fields, capable of shifting form and merging consciousness at will. Their war had consumed 3 star systems, destroyed 17 sentient civilizations, and created a region of space so toxic that most galactic powers had declared the entire quadrant a no-go zone. "The diplomatic corps wants us to observe," Elena said, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "But observation isn't enough. Not this time." Liu raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerously close to a violation of our non-intervention protocols." A holographic projection flickered to life, detailed schematics of the conflict, billions of data points representing centuries of warfare. Casualty figures scrolled like a macabre ticker, each number representing entire civilizations reduced to cosmic dust. Protocols were written by people who've never seen what we're looking at. Elena muttered, "This isn't just a war. It's a systematic extinction event." The station's eye, a quantum neural network named ARIA, chose that moment to interject. Diplomatic intervention probability, 0.37%. Potential diplomatic success margin, statistically negligible. Jack chuckled. "Those are the best odds I've heard all day." Elena's smile was predatory. The human team assembled for this mission was anything but conventional. Dr. Aisha Nyong'o, their economic strategist, had developed algorithms that could predict economic shifts across entire galactic civilizations. Dr. Miguel Santos, their xenobiological expert, could design medical interventions that worked across fundamentally different forms of life. And then there was the hospital ship. It wasn't a warship. It was something far more dangerous. "We're going to need every resource we have," Elena said, pulling up the ship's specifications. Designed to look vulnerable, it was anything but. Quantum adaptive shields that could absorb and redirect energy. Communication systems that could translate not just languages, but emotional states. Medical technologies that could perform miracles on life forms humans hadn't even discovered yet. Jack studied the ship's design. "They'll never see us coming." "That's the point," Elena replied. "We're not here to fight a war. We're here to make war impossible." The quantum message continued to dissolve, its final fragments revealing coordinates deep in the most contested region of the Sigma Quadrant. A challenge, an invitation, a potential path to peace that no one had dared to explore. Aria's voice cut through the silence. "Mission preparation at 62.7%. Recommended launch window in 47 standard hours." Elena looked at Jack. The real work was about to begin. "Let's go save a galaxy," she said. The Volare communication burst arrived like a solar flare, raw and unfiltered. Dr. Aisha Nyong'o watched the data stream with a mathematician's precision and a warrior's intensity. Each pulse of plasma-encoded information was a weapon, not of destruction, but of complex mathematical provocation. "They're testing us," she murmured to Elena Reyes, who stood beside her in the ship's primary analysis chamber. The message was both a challenge and an ultimatum. The Volari Collective, represented by the Eternal Flame, their most revered military diplomatic entity, had detected the human ship's approach. Instead of immediate destruction, they had chosen something far more intricate, a series of impossible tasks. Each task was designed to be a crucible, a test that would typically take centuries for most civilizations to comprehend, let alone complete. The first challenge involved a quantum entanglement problem that required simultaneous communication across 17 different dimensional planes. "Typical galactic posturing," Jack Liu commented, his neural interface already parsing the complex mathematical language. "They want to prove our technological inferiority." What the Volari didn't understand was that humanity's greatest strength had never been raw technological power, but adaptive intelligence. Dr. Miguel Santos entered the chamber, his holographic medical displays spinning around him like a complex planetary system. "The biological components of the challenge are fascinating," he said. "They're asking us to demonstrate medical intervention across fundamentally incompatible life forms." The challenge was brutal in its complexity. Create a medical intervention that could simultaneously heal a silicon-based Lithosian crystal matrix and stabilize a Volari plasma energy form. It was like being asked to perform surgery on both a stone and a lightning bolt simultaneously. Elena studied the holographic representation. Most species would have seen this as an impossible task. Humans saw it as an invitation. "AI," she called to the ship's AI. "Begin comprehensive analysis. Cross-reference all xenobiological data we have. I want multiple intervention strategies." The AI's response was instantaneous. Millions of potential scenarios began to map themselves, each one a complex dance of medical innovation. The second challenge was economic. The Volari presented a series of resource allocation problems that had stalemated their centuries-long conflict with the Lithosians. Redistribute limited resources across two fundamentally incompatible civilizations without creating new conflict vectors. Aisha's fingers danced across her quantum computing interface. "It's not just a mathematical problem," she explained. "It's a test of understanding. They want to know if we can see the deeper patterns of conflict." Jack leaned in, studying the complex economic models. "Most species would try to balance resources. We're going to redefine the entire concept of resource allocation." The final challenge was perhaps the most insidious. Create a communication protocol that could bridge the emotional and psychological divide between two species that had known nothing but mutual destruction for centuries. "They're testing our empathy," Elena realized. "Not just our technology." The Volari's Eternal Flame was watching, waiting. The human ship hung in the contested space of the Sigma Quadrant, a single point of potential transformation in a region defined by endless conflict. Dr. Santos began preparing the first medical intervention protocols, quantum adaptive nanites that could restructure themselves to work across impossible biological boundaries. Each nanite was a tiny miracle of engineering, capable of reading and responding to life at its most fundamental level. "We're not just solving their challenges," Elena said, her voice a mixture of determination and wonder. "We're showing them a different way of existing." Araya's voice cut through the tension. "Challenge analysis complete. Probability of success. Highly improbable by conventional galactic standards." Jack grinned. "Conventional was never our specialty." The human ship continued its approach, a beacon of potential in a region of absolute darkness. The Volari watched. The Lithosians waited, and humanity prepared to do what no one thought possible: turn a series of impossible challenges into a path toward peace. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A junior research assistant named Maya Rodriguez, whose neural implant was processing background data, while the senior team focused on the primary challenges. "Wait," she interrupted, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the ship's primary research chamber. "I found something." Dr. Aisha Nyong'o turned, her quantum computing interface still spinning complex economic models. The entire team looked up, a moment of collective anticipation hanging in the air. Maya's holographic display erupted with a cascade of interconnected data points. What had appeared to be random information was actually a complex network of potential solutions that traditional analysis had completely missed. The quantum entanglement communication challenge wasn't just a test of technological capability. It was a linguistic puzzle that required understanding beyond mere information transmission. "It's not about sending a message," Maya explained, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "It's about creating a shared context of understanding." Dr. Miguel Santos leaned in, his medical displays reconfiguring to match Maya's discoveries. The biological intervention challenge was revealing itself to be far more nuanced than a simple medical procedure. It was about communication at the cellular, no, the quantum level. "We're not healing different life forms," Santos muttered, more to himself than to the team. "We're teaching them how to communicate." The quantum adaptive nanites began to transform. No longer simple medical instruments, they became something closer to linguistic translators, capable of understanding the fundamental language of different biological systems. Jack Liu's neural interface was working overtime, connecting patterns that no conventional analysis could detect. The economic challenge was revealing itself to be a complex ecosystem problem rather than a simple resource allocation issue. "They've been fighting over resources," he said, "but what they're really fighting about is communication." Alina Reyes watched the team work, a strategic smile playing across her lips. The Volari and Lithosians had been locked in conflict for so long that they had forgotten how to see each other as anything other than enemies. Araria, the ship's AI, began to compile the emerging strategy. Millions of potential scenarios mapped themselves, each one a delicate dance of interdisciplinary problem-solving. The first medical drone launched was nothing like a traditional medical instrument. It was a quantum communication device disguised as a healing mechanism. As it approached the first contested zone, it began to broadcast, not messages, but context. Cellular memories, quantum-level emotional states, the accumulated trauma of generations of conflict, translated into a language that transcended biological boundaries. "We're not solving their problems," Alina realized. "We're helping them see their problems differently." Maya's original insight continued to cascade through their systems. The challenges weren't tests to be conquered. They were invitations to reimagine conflict itself. The economic models began to shift. Instead of zero-sum resource allocation, the team was developing a dynamic ecosystem approach. Resources weren't just material, they were opportunities for mutual growth. Dr. Santos' medical team developed intervention protocols that didn't just heal physical damage. They created communication pathways between fundamentally different forms of life. Jack Liu's strategic analysis revealed the true nature of the conflict. It wasn't about territory or resources. It was about a fundamental failure of understanding. "We're not here to end a war," he said quietly. "We're here to make the war irrelevant." As the first medical communication drone entered the contested zone, the Volari and Lithosian monitoring systems went silent. Something unprecedented was happening. Araya's voice cut through the tension. "Probability of conventional success, 0.03%. Alina's laugh was sharp. "Conventional was never our style." The human ship continued its approach, a beacon of potential in a region defined by absolute darkness. The challenges were no longer obstacles. They were opportunities. And humanity was just getting started. The first indication that something extraordinary was happening came as a microscopic flutter in the quantum communication network. Dr. Aisha Nyong'o caught it first, a harmonic resonance that shouldn't have been possible. "This is impossible," she muttered, her fingers flying across the quantum interface. The breakthrough wasn't technological. It was conceptual. Their quantum communication device, originally designed to solve the seemingly impossible interdimensional transmission challenge, had done something entirely unexpected. It wasn't just transmitting information. It was creating a shared consciousness. In the primary research chamber, Maya Rodriguez watched in awe as the holographic displays began to shift. What had appeared to be random data points were now revealing themselves as a complex, living network of understanding. "It's like they're learning to think together," she whispered. Dr. Miguel Santos approached, his medical displays spinning with new data. The quantum adaptive nanites were no longer just medical instruments. They had become something else entirely, living bridges of communication between fundamentally incompatible life forms. The Volari, pure energy beings contained within electromagnetic fields, were the first to react. Their monitoring systems, designed to detect the slightest threat, instead began to receive something they had never experienced before: pure, unfiltered context. Generations of conflict, layers of misunderstanding, the accumulated trauma that had driven the Lithosian-Volari War for centuries. But not as a weapon, as understanding. Jack Liu's strategic analysis was working overtime. "They're not just receiving information," he said to Elena Reyes. "They're experiencing each other's entire existential reality." The ship's AI, began to compile the emerging data. Millions of potential scenarios mapped themselves, each one more intricate than the last. This was beyond communication. This was translation of existence itself. In the contested zone of the Sigma Quadrant, something unprecedented happened. A Volari patrol ship, designed for destruction, suddenly changed its trajectory. Not through external intervention, but through internal transformation. The ship's plasma-based consciousness was experiencing the collective memories of the Lithosians. Centuries of suffering, generations of loss. The fundamental desire for survival that had driven both species to this endless conflict. Simultaneously, Lithosian crystal matrix communication networks began to resonate with something entirely new. Empathy. Not as a concept, but as a lived experience. Dr. Santos realized what was happening. "We're not just communicating," he said. "We're teaching them how to understand each other at the most fundamental level of existence." Elena Reyes watched the emerging data with a mixture of wonder and strategic calculation. This was beyond diplomatic intervention. This was a fundamental reimagining of conflict itself. She called, "Begin comprehensive analysis of the emerging communication network." The AI's response was immediate. Analyzing. Probability of conventional conflict resolution. Statistically immeasurable. Maya Rodriguez caught a glimpse of something in the data streams. A pattern. A possibility. "We're not solving their conflict," she said quietly. "We're showing them how to solve it themselves." The quantum communication device continued its work, not as a weapon, not as an intervention, but as a bridge of understanding. Jack Liu noticed something else. The economic models they had developed were no longer theoretical. They were becoming real-time adaptive systems. Resources weren't just being redistributed. They were being reimagined. "They're learning," he said, "not just communicating. Learning." In the vast, dark expanse of the Sigma Quadrant, a single human ship was doing something no one had thought possible. They weren't fighting a war. They were making war itself obsolete. Araya's voice cut through the tension. Emerging communication network stability, 73.6% and rising. Elena's smile was sharp. "We're just getting started." The quantum breakthrough continued, a living testament to humanity's most powerful weapon, the ability to understand, to connect, to transform. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps went into full panic mode. "They're doing what?" Admiral Heinrich Rothschild's holographic projection flickered with barely contained rage. The emergency communication channel buzzed with a mixture of static and raw, unfiltered frustration. Elena Reyes stood calm, her hands clasped behind her back. The mission briefing room was a study in controlled tension. Jack Liu and Maya Rodriguez flanked her, each a study in professional composure. "We're facilitating communication," Elena responded, her voice clinical and precise. Not intervention. Not interference. Communication. The Admiral's hologram sputtered. The subtext was clear. Humanity was not supposed to be solving galactic conflicts, especially not this conflict. The Lithosian-Volari War was a carefully maintained balance of mutual destruction that kept several galactic powers in check. What humanity was doing threatened everything. Dr. Aisha Nyong'o's economic models were already revealing the deeper implications. The conflict wasn't just a war. It was an entire economic ecosystem built on perpetual destruction. Do you understand what you're dismantling? The Admiral's voice carried the weight of centuries of diplomatic protocol. Maya Rodriguez stepped forward. Her neural interface was still processing the quantum communication breakthrough, streams of data dancing around her like a living aura. "We're not dismantling anything," she said. "We're revealing what's actually happening." The quantum communication network had done something unprecedented. It wasn't just transmitting information. It was creating a shared historical context that both the Lithosians and Volari had forgotten existed. Generational trauma. Collective memory. The fundamental misunderstandings that had driven centuries of conflict. Dr. Miguel Santos' medical team was tracking something extraordinary. The quantum adaptive nanites were no longer just communication devices. They were becoming living bridges of understanding. A Volari patrol ship, previously configured for total destruction, had not just changed course. It had fundamentally transformed its operational parameters. "They're learning," Jack Liu observed, watching the emerging data streams. Not just communication. Fundamental reimagining of existence. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps saw a threat. Humanity saw an opportunity. Admiral Rothschild's hologram began to destabilize. "You're disrupting a carefully maintained balance of power." Elena's response was measured. "No, we're revealing the illusion of that balance." The economic models developed by Dr. Nyong'o were cutting through generations of conflict. Resources weren't just being redistributed. They were being reimagined as collaborative opportunities rather than zero-sum competition. Araya, the ship's AI, began compiling comprehensive analysis. Conflict resolution probability. Emerging and nonlinear. Maya caught something in the data streams. A pattern. A possibility that went beyond mere communication. "We're not solving their conflict," she said quietly. "We're showing them how to solve it themselves." The quantum communication device continued its work, not as a weapon, not as an intervention, but as a living bridge of understanding. The Lithosian crystal matrix communication networks began to resonate with something entirely new. Empathy. Not as a philosophical concept, but as a lived quantum-level experience. Jack Liu noticed the strategic implications. "They're not just sharing information," he said to Elena. "They're sharing existence." In the vast, dark expanse of the Sigma Quadrant, a single human ship was doing something no one had thought possible. They weren't fighting a war. They were making war itself obsolete. Admiral Rothschild's final transmission was a mixture of threat and desperation. "You're stepping beyond your mandate." Elena's response was simple. "Our mandate is humanity's potential, not your limited imagination." The cultural confrontation was just beginning, and humanity was ready. The first cracks in the centuries-old conflict appeared like quantum ripples, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet fundamentally transformative. Deep within the galactic archives, xenohistorians began to notice something unprecedented. The communication patterns between the Volari and Lithosian civilizations were changing. Not through diplomatic negotiations, not through military interventions, but through something far more profound. Understanding. Dr. Elena Reyes stood before the holographic display, watching as generations of conflict began to unravel. Jack Liu's strategic analysis was working overtime, mapping the emerging patterns of communication and resource redistribution. "They're rewriting their own history," Maya Rodriguez whispered, her neural interface parsing data streams that would have overwhelmed most biological processing systems. The quantum communication network had done more than transmit information. It had created a shared consciousness, a living bridge between two civilizations that had known nothing but mutual destruction for centuries. Dr. Aisha Nyong'o's economic models were revealing the true nature of the conflict. It wasn't about resources. It wasn't about territory. It was about a fundamental failure of communication. "Look," she said, pointing to a holographic representation of economic flows. The war was never about survival. It was about misunderstanding. Araya, the ship's AI, began compiling comprehensive analysis. Conflict transformation probability, nonlinear and exponential. The Volari were the first to show significant change. Their plasma-based consciousness, previously configured for total destruction, began to exhibit something entirely new. Empathy, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. Lithosian crystal matrix communication networks started to resonate with a frequency of understanding that had been impossible mere weeks ago. Generations of trauma began to unpack themselves, not through violence, but through shared context. Dr. Miguel Santos' medical team tracked something extraordinary. The quantum adaptive nanites were no longer just communication devices. They had become living bridges of healing, not just physical, but existential. A Volari patrol ship that would have previously obliterated any potential threat now adjusted its course to provide assistance to a damaged Lithosian research vessel. The action was so unexpected that it sent shockwaves through the entire galactic communication network. Jack Liu caught the strategic implications immediately. "They're not just communicating," he said to Alina. "They're reimagining their entire existence." The Galactic Diplomatic Corps continued to panic. Admiral Rothschild's repeated transmissions became increasingly desperate. "You're dismantling centuries of carefully maintained." Alina's interruption was calm. "We're not dismantling anything. We're revealing what's always been possible." Maya Rodriguez discovered something in the data streams that took everyone's breath away. The quantum communication network was doing more than sharing information. It was creating a collective memory, a shared understanding that transcended the boundaries of individual existence. "They're learning how to see each other," she said quietly. "Not as enemies, but as beings." The economic models developed by Dr. Nyong'o were revolutionary. Resources were no longer seen as zero-sum commodities to be fought over. They became collaborative opportunities for mutual growth. Araya's voice cut through the tension. Conflict resolution probability, emerging and transformative. In the vast, dark expanse of the Sigma Quadrant, a single human ship continued its work. They weren't fighting a war. They were making war itself obsolete. Jack Liu watched the emerging data with a mixture of wonder and strategic calculation. "We're not just changing a conflict," he said. "We're changing how civilizations understand themselves." Alina's smile was sharp, filled with the quiet confidence of someone who understood humanity's true potential. "We're just getting started." The turning point had arrived, and humanity had brought nothing more dangerous than understanding. The ripples of humanity's intervention spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. In the shadowy corridors of the Galactic Council, whispers began. Hushed conversations between representatives of civilizations that had long been silenced by the Lithosian-Volari conflict. They were watching, waiting, hoping. Dr. Alina Rice didn't know it yet, but they had become more than just observers. They had become catalysts. The first unexpected ally emerged from the most unlikely place. The Quantum Resonance Collective, a group of energy-based beings from the Andromeda Rim, began sending encrypted transmissions, not offers of support, something far more dangerous. Information. "They're sharing our approach," Maya Rodriguez said, her neural interface crackling with excitement. Holographic data streams danced around her, revealing a network of communication that defied traditional galactic intelligence protocols. Jack Liu studied the emerging patterns. "Not just sharing," he corrected. "They're learning." Dr. Aisha Nyong'o's economic models were working overtime. The transmission wasn't just about the Lithosian-Volari conflict. It was a blueprint for reimagining conflict resolution across entire civilizations. Araya, The ship's AI began compiling comprehensive analysis. Emerging collaborative network. Exponential growth detected. The medical team, led by Dr. Miguel Santos, discovered something extraordinary. The quantum adaptive nanites were no longer just communication devices. They had become living repositories of collective healing. A trinary collective from the Epsilon cluster sent their first communication. Their message was simple yet profound. Show us how. Alina realized they had done something unprecedented. They weren't just resolving a conflict. They were creating a new paradigm of galactic interaction. We're not just changing a war, she said quietly to her team. We're changing how civilizations understand themselves. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps continued to panic. Admiral Rothschild's transmissions became increasingly desperate, but they were losing ground. Other civilizations were watching, learning, becoming inspired. Jack Liu caught the strategic implications immediately. We've created something more powerful than any weapon, he observed. A method of understanding. Maya Rodriguez discovered something in the data streams that took everyone's breath away. The communication network was creating a collective memory, a shared understanding that transcended individual civilizations. They're learning how to see each other, she said, not as threats, but as potential. The encrypted transmissions began to multiply. The Quantum Resonance Collective, the Trinary Collective. Dozens of civilizations that had been silenced by generations of conflict were now finding their voice. Dr. Santos' medical team tracked the psychological impact. The quantum communication network was healing generations of trauma, not through force, through understanding. We're not just changing a conflict, Alina said, watching the emerging data. We're changing the fundamental way civilizations interact. Araya's voice cut through the tension. Collaborative network stability, 87.4% and rising. In the vast, dark expanse of the Sigma Quadrant, a single human ship had become something more than a diplomatic mission. It was a beacon of possibility. The unexpected allies were gathering, and they were ready to reimagine everything. Jack Liu watched the emerging network with a mixture of wonder and strategic calculation. We've started something, he said, that we can't possibly control. Alina's smile was sharp, filled with the quiet confidence of someone who understood humanity's true potential. That's exactly the point. The unexpected allies were just the beginning, and humanity had brought nothing more dangerous than hope. The final confrontation was nothing like anyone had expected. No battleships, no weapons, just understanding. Dr. Alina Reyes stood before the Galactic Council, her team behind her. The holographic chamber was a cacophony of alien geometries, crystalline Lithosian representatives, plasma-formed Volari entities, energy-based collectives from a dozen star systems. The silence was deafening. We didn't come to end a war, Alina began, her voice clear and unwavering. We came to make war itself irrelevant. Araya, the ship's AI, began projecting a comprehensive data visualization that filled the entire chamber. Centuries of conflict, generations of trauma, economic systems built on mutual destruction, all laid bare in a living, breathing representation of galactic history. Jack Liu watched the strategic implications unfold. The visualization wasn't just data. It was a collective memory, a shared understanding that transcended individual civilizations. Maya Rodriguez's neural interface was working overtime, parsing emotional resonances that no traditional communication system could detect. She saw something extraordinary happening. The representatives weren't just listening. They were experiencing. Dr. Aisha Nyong'o's economic models had become something more than analysis. They were a blueprint for a new way of existing. Resources weren't zero-sum. They were opportunities for mutual growth. The Volari Eternal Flame, once the most feared military entity in the Sigma Quadrant, spoke first. Its plasma-based form shifted, revealing something unprecedented. Vulnerability. We did not understand. The entity communicated, its energy patterns revealing layers of generational pain. We only knew conflict. Dr. Miguel Santos' medical team had tracked the psychological transformation. The quantum adaptive nanites had done more than communicate. They had healed. The Lithosian Crystal Collective responded, its complex crystalline structure vibrating with a frequency of understanding that would have been impossible weeks ago. Survival is not victory, they communicated. Understanding is. Admiral Rothschild's holographic transmission attempted to interrupt. Elena didn't even look his way. This isn't diplomacy, she said. This is evolution. The data visualization continued to expand. Economic networks, communication pathways, shared histories, a living representation of what was possible when civilizations chose understanding over destruction. Araya's voice cut through the tension. Conflict resolution probability, transformative and exponential. Maya caught something in the data streams that took everyone's breath away. The communication network was creating something more profound than peace. It was creating possibility. Jack Liu watched the strategic implications with a mixture of wonder and calculation. We're not just changing a conflict, he observed. We're changing how civilizations understand themselves. The unexpected allies, the Quantum Resonance Collective, the Trinary Cluster, dozens of civilizations that had been silenced by generations of conflict, were now active participants. Dr. Santos' medical team had discovered something extraordinary. The healing wasn't just psychological, it was existential. We're rewriting the fundamental way civilizations interact, Elena said, her voice carrying the weight of generations of human potential. The Galactic Council chamber transformed. No longer a place of diplomatic posturing, a crucible of collective reimagining. The Volari Eternal Flame's final communication was simple yet profound. We choose to understand. The Lithosian Crystal Collective's response resonated through the chamber. Together. Jack Liu leaned close to Elena. We started something we can't control. Her smile was sharp, filled with the quiet confidence of someone who understood humanity's true potential. That's exactly the point. In the vast, dark expanse of the galaxy, humanity had brought nothing more dangerous than hope, and everything was about to change.